country on Friday night and on Thursday night by the time we get to Friday morning. Temperatures again around average for the time of year by Friday morning. So a bit of a misty, murky start out there. Some sunshine across the west first thing, and that sunshine will become a little bit more widespread through Friday and as we head into the weekend. So the best of the sunshine in the west on Friday and Saturday, and then in the east on Sunday. I'll see you later.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs Co. Coming up tonight, the Working Time Directive looks about to be scrapped. Some people say, yes, victory for common sense. Other people, though, say that this is the start of the rowing back of workers' rights. What do you make to it all? And John Major, he's been speaking out, saying that people that commit petty crime shouldn't be locked up. Instead, we should come up with alternate solutions for them. Well, how about they operate in an alternate manner and do not commit petty crime in the first place, and then if they do, perhaps don't start crying when they get sent to prison. Am I a little bit harsh? And get this, a baby with 3 parents now has been born, more than one in fact. What do you make to this? Is it just development in science, or are we trying to play God a little bit too much? And should we try and settle this once and for all? Culture wars, things like the whole trans rights and women's spaces and all that kind of stuff. Does it matter? Yes or no? Rishi Sunak says yes. Keir Starmer says no. What says you? We're going to get into all of that tonight, but before we do, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Good evening. The top stories on GB News tonight. Jacob Rees-Mogg has criticised the Prime Minister over scrapping plans to remove thousands of European Union laws. The former Cabinet Minister says Rishi Sunak has shredded his own promise after he U-turned on a pledge to eliminate them all by the end of the year. Earlier, the Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch said only around 600 of the 4,800 laws would now be revoked under the retained EU law bill. That's due, she says, to risks of legal uncertainty if they were automatically scrapped. Well, today, Sir Keir Starmer has criticised Rishi Sunak, saying he no longer has a mandate to run the country in the first Prime Minister's questions since the local elections in England. The Conservative Party lost control of 48 councils and more than 1,000 council seats, while the Labour Party gained more than 500. The Prime Minister defended the results, saying a general election holds far more significance. But the Labour leader insisted the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of voters up and down the country.
Last year, he lost a Tory beauty contest to the member for South West Norfolk, who then lost to a lettuce. Last week, when he finally came into contact with voters, he lost everywhere. No matter who the electorate is, the Prime Minister keeps entering a two-horse race and somehow finishing third. Given his track record, who does he think he's actually got a mandate from?
Mr. Speaker, it's a bit rich to hear about mandates from the person who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, go through the list, Mr. Speaker. Nationalisations, NHS outsourcing, universal credit, and now tuition fees. Mr. Speaker, he was for them all before he was against them. He's not just Sir Softy, he's Sir Flaky too.
Well, in other news today, the Archbishop of Canterbury has condemned the government's illegal migration bill in a rare intervention in the House of Lords. The controversial legislation aims to detain and promptly remove migrants who arrive in the UK in small boats. It looks to limit the ability of the European Court of Human Rights to prevent the deportation of asylum seekers. Downing Street says the bill is compassionate and fair. Justin Welby says it treats migrants as invaders.
It is a siloed bill, not a whole-of-government bill. It does not draw in conflict management and prevention, which drives migration. It does not draw in climate impacts, which drive migration and conflict. It is isolationist. It is morally unacceptable and politically impractical.
Well, the former Trade Secretary, Lord Peter Lilly, has told GB News the House of Lords has no option but to pass the bill.
It will have a tough time, but it will get through, because if the Lords were to stop the measures to stop the boat people, that would be the end of the House of Lords. Then it would commit suicide. The public wouldn't stand that.
And you can watch the full exclusive interview with Lord Peter Lilly at 6 o'clock on Sunday on Gloria Meets right here on GB News. Now, interest rates are expected to rise again this week as inflation remains high, according to economists. Experts believe the base rate will rise by 0.25% to 4.5%. That would be the 12th consecutive raise by the central bank and mark the highest level since 2008. Any rise is expected to make loans and mortgage rates more expensive. Members of the Public and Commercial Services Union have voted to renew their mandate to keep taking industrial action for the next 6 months. The decision comes as other civil servants belonging to the Prospect Union began a new walkout in their long-running dispute over pay, jobs and redundancy terms. This follows the government's 4.5% pay rise offer, which the union said would further erode living standards. The publisher of the Mirror newspaper has unreservedly apologised to the Duke of Sussex for unlawful information gathering. At the start of a High Court trial over alleged phone hacking, Mirror Group newspapers admitted that Prince Harry's legal challenge warranted compensation. The tabloid newspaper also promised the behaviour would never be repeated. Other high-profile claimants involved in the trial include former Girls Aloud singer Cheryl, the estate of George Michael and the footballer Ian Wright. And lastly, the Republican Congressman George Santos has been placed in US custody after being charged with fraud and money laundering. The Justice Department says the 34-year-old used campaign funds to purchase designer clothes and pay off personal debt. Mr. Santos also allegedly applied for unemployment money while being employed and running for Congress. He's expected to appear in court in New York later today. We'll be watching that story for you as well. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me this evening, Martin Daubney is a journalist and former Brexit Party MEP, and Aaron Bastani is the founder of Novara Media. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi.
Welcome to you at home too. You know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three here. It's very much about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk as usual is the email, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Now, when it comes to Brexit, there's lots of talk, isn't there, about red tape and all the rest of it, and Brexit freedoms and Brexit benefits and all the rest of it. The debate rumbles on and on. One of the areas now under the microscope is the so-called Working Time Directive. You might be familiar with this, basically. It restricts the amount of hours many of us can work unless, of course, you opt out. Well, the government is basically looking at getting rid of that. And they're saying it's going to save businesses about £1 billion a year. It's going to capitalise on all of these kind of freedoms and Brexit freedoms and all the rest of it. But many people on the flip side of the argument are saying, whoa there, Tiger. I see what you're doing here. You're gradually, inch by inch, rowing back on workers' rights. Aaron, what says you?
I am going to say that we shouldn't get rid of the Working Time Directive. There are lots of opt-outs. If you want an opt-out as an employee, you can opt out. I'm very sympathetic to the idea that if a worker or an individual wants to work more, they can. That's actually something you can already do within the existing legislation. It doesn't apply to senior director roles, it doesn't apply to people who are self-employed, it doesn't apply to people who are working in industry with 24-hour staffing necessities. Mm-hmm. It doesn't apply to emergency workers. So it will frustrate a tiny subsection of the population. And like I say, if that's a major issue for them, they can apply for an opt-out. So, look, I'm not fussed. It's not the hill I want to die on. But fundamentally, I don't think it's a massive issue. Although I should say, as somebody on the left, my preference for defending workers' rights is sectoral wage bargaining and trade unions. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan of the state saying from above what you can and can't do. But I think the extent of this legislation and how much it impacts people on an everyday basis, I think that's often overstated for political reasons.
And do you think, speaking of those political reasons, do you think people are being too quick now? To me, it feels like anything and everything. There are certain segments of society that just don't like Brexit and they don't like the Tories. So whatever it is, it becomes less about the issue, so today, this particular directive, and more just about another stick, basically, to beat Brexit on the head with. Is that fair or not?
I think that's fair. There's a lack of nuance, I think, generally in these kinds of debates. That applies both to the left and the right. You know, I won't name names. There's a certain shock jock on a talk radio station in this country who I think is actually just as toxic as any right-wing journalist.
I know who you mean, because I follow you on Twitter.
I won't say their name, so I'm not in the business of pointing fingers, but I do think there's real nuance to stuff like this. And I do think, you know, with this press release, the government is saying it could unlock productivity. Well, look, this legislation is already in place. It's enforced in France, the Netherlands, Germany, and they have higher levels of productivity than we do. So if only it was that easy to increase UK productivity.
Martin?
It's obscene that a single European Union directive is in control in Britain now. It's exactly what people voted to get rid of in 2016. Take back control of our borders, of our money and our laws. You know, the fact that Strasbourg or Brussels has a single scintilla of control of how we work, how we rule our country is astonishing. All these years later, and today we've seen another massive U-turn from the Conservative Party. I just don't know what the Tories stand for anymore. Now, they said they were
When
going
you
to
say
scrap...
that U-turn, are you on about they had these 4,000 things, they were going to get rid of them all, and it rode back to about 800, then it rode down again.
The retained EU law bill, which was about the bonfire of red tape that we were promised by Rees-Mogg, by the Brexiteers, by the European Research Group, and we've seen a U-turn today. And now it's going to be as few as 600. And all these years later, you know, here we are still tied to Strasbourg, tied to Brussels. And as far as law goes, it's about supremacy of law. One of the very, very early battlefronts of Brexit, before the referendum, actually, was Polish truck drivers who were allowed to work excessive hours, much more than British truck drivers, because Polish laws allowed them to sleep in their cabins, to work longer hours, whereas British truck drivers who contacted me, this is 2015, before the referendum, saying it's unfair, restrictive working practice, but Polish law reigns supreme, whereas we are still now tied to European law. I agree. A lot of people I meet, especially taxi drivers, people who work in warehouses, they want to work more hours. They need to work more hours. They're struggling for the cost of living.
And they can opt out.
Yeah, they can opt out. But I think this isn't about more unions, it's about less European Union control. And how the hell, Michelle, we're still having this conversation all these years after Brexit.
Well, why are we?
Beggars belief.
Why do you think we are, then? Why do you think that things are not moving at a pace that would make you happier?
Because the Conservatives aren't conservative. They've surrendered on Brexit time and time again, on fishing, on Northern Ireland, now on workers'
But Brexit's
rights.
not conservative. People voted Brexit across the political spectrum. So when you say a conservative, not conservative, that's not really... Not all Conservatives are Brexiteers and vice versa.
I'm not conservative. You know, I'm a proper Brexiteer, but I'm not conservative. I voted Conservative once in 2017, regretted it till my dying day. They betrayed us on Brexit. What I'm saying is they're the party in rule, they're the party in power whose job it was to get Brexit done. They failed. This is the final failure.
But why?
I think they'll get decimated.
What would be in that? What would be in the Tories deliberately dragging their feet, creating, stalling here, there and everywhere? They know that this country voted Brexit. They know that perhaps their opportunity for re-election depends on that. So why would they, to follow your train of logic there, why would they deliberately try to hinder the process?
There's two reasons. Either they've lied, or they've realised they can't do it, so they've written a cheque they can't cash, or, and here's the real point, that there are two Conservative parties within the Tory party. There's the Wets, the Lib Dems, the Shire Tories, and there's the Red Wall. What's going to happen in the next general election? They're going to get wiped out, and they need to have a forest fire and start again. This is an example of why the Conservative voters just don't think the Conservatives are Conservative anymore.
You made a noise then, halfway through that. I won't try and describe or replicate the noise, but what was that about?
What noise was this?
It might have been a bit of trapped wind, actually.
No,
I think he was responding to one of the points that he was making.
I think I chuckled at something about the Wets.
Right.
No, the Wets, and it's an old term, but there's something really important here, which is to say that in this country, because of first past the post, we have two very large parties, and within them they congeal people who disagree on so much. Now, the spotlight has been on the Labour Party in the last decade. Oh, they can't get along, and it's not because they're all, stupid and self-defeating and self-destructive. Many of them are, by the way, but it's also an outgrowth of how our electoral system works and how it pushes together people who otherwise disagree on really big issues. And a case in point is the Conservatives on Brexit. You've had this coalition for decades between ultra-free marketeers, social liberals, people that want to leave the European Union, small business owners, ultra-large business, people that hate the CBI, people that think the CBI is God's gift, the Confederation of British Industry. And I think what we're talking about here crystallises all of that.
Well, CBI, I think that's yesterday's news now, isn't it? I don't think there's any coming back for those guys. Patricia says, I'm totally convinced that the UK is still secretly within the EU. John says, basically this is a silly priority. All of this has worked for years, so why change it? But then would you apply that kind of sentiment to other things then? You could argue that actually lots of this stuff has worked for years, so why get rid of any of it? Martin's point, a very valid one if you ask me, is literally people voted for sovereignty, for power to start and end, if you like, with UK Parliament. So why then would you get rid of anything if your sentiment, if you expand it there, John, and say that it was all working? Michelle, not me, says, well said, Martin, I voted Leave and this lot of Tories have done nothing at all to get us a real Brexit. She says she wouldn't vote for the Tories again and she believes that there are millions like her.
Yep.
Leighton says, why not work 12 hours a day then, giving 24-hour cover, but work a month on and a month off? One of the things that I find interesting about working patterns, a few of my family members are shift workers. And a few of them have got children. And I found it quite astonishing the way that various organisations seem to, the amount of notice they seem to give on their shift patterns.
Right.
And I sit there and I think, how do some employers expect their employees to be able to manage things like childcare and all the rest of it when their shift patterns seem to be changing with such frequency?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how right that is, because I am a capitalist, I am in favour of business and all the rest of it. But sometimes when I see the struggle that people have to manage childcare and shifts, part of me thinks that that isn't right. Am I missing something?
No, I think it's about freedom, freedom of practice, freedom of work. And I do worry, I know we disagree on unions because every time there's a power grab for more unionisation, it's actually, I think, more of a political land grab. And I think people are getting a bit sick of strike culture. We've had it for months now. And, of course, the left will always hold back. The answer is more unions. But
I don't think the answer is more unions. Unions are a means to an end, aren't they? For instance, with junior doctors, they want a pay rise, and the union is a means to an end. People don't join unions because joining unions is cool. I'm sure there's a small fraction of people that do, but ultimately, it's not really a left-right. I meet many Conservative, or I have met many Conservative voters who are in trade unions, and they say, does a great job for me.
Yeah, but it's become a political battle. I mean, you have to admit that the coordinated strike activity of teachers, of doctors, of nurses, of trains, it's designed to inflict maximum pain on the Conservative government.
In a way, I wish it was coordinated, because then it would come to a resolution one way or the other.
Oh, come on, you can't deny. If it's not, it might not be on the table coordinated as a, what's the word, a grand strike, whatever it's called.
Yeah. General strike.
General strike. Yeah, it might not be as coordinated and as clear as that, but come on, you must think, that's quite coordinated.
I think we're going to genuinely disagree on this, because Unison is the country's largest trade union. They have repeatedly walked away from strikes. We've seen it with the NHS stuff, for instance. So the Royal College of Nurses is balloted successfully for more strikes. Unite, also more strikes. Unison, by far the largest trade union in the public sector, has decided not to go on more strikes. So I don't think that's necessarily true. Unison is this ginormous union, and actually, more often than not, they're walking away from strike action. So, yeah, some trade unions, the CWU, for instance, postal workers, they are really up for strike action, because fundamentally, the CEOs of that business, I think, are destroying a 500-year-old British brand, the Royal Mail. And I think Conservatives and Labour voters should get behind that. You know, a majority of Conservative voters back bringing it into public ownership. So I think it's a bit more complex than that. And when you've got the country's largest union generally deferring from strike action, I think saying that it's coordinated, I think it's an overstatement.
Well, what's destroying... I'm going off topic a little bit, but I'll respond to your point about the Royal Mail. What's destroying this great British brand of the Royal Mail, as you put it, is changing consumer habits.
Yeah.
Who writes letters anymore and post letters?
It's all about parcels.
Yeah, it's all about parcels.
Yeah.
And this is one of the challenges, that actually there's a fine balance between allowing an organisation to develop and evolve versus maintaining your workforce as it once was, the size, the scale and the scope of responsibilities that they once had. And let's not even touch on the whole AI thing, because I find it fascinating at the moment how many people are trying to push for non-compulsory redundancies, and then you've got this AI thing creeping away and it's nipping at people's ankles, and I worry about what that would mean for the future of people's jobs in this country, I can tell you. Anyway, John Major, he says, get this, that the UK is locking up too many offenders. He says, it makes me laugh because I think the complete opposite. I personally don't think we lock up enough people, quite frankly. He says that short-term sentences are pointless and non-custodial measures would be more effective. Let's not forget, I'll tell you what would be really effective, maybe not committing crime in the first place. How about that? Anyway, give me your thoughts on do you agree with John Major or not? I'll see you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Radio.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 alongside me, Martin Daubney, the journalist and former Brexit Party MEP, and Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. Now, Sir John Major has basically hit out at the Tories. He says they're constantly locking up criminals, and he reckons that all these short-term sentences are pointless. What he's basically saying is that everyone wants to be kind of tough on crime and says that ultimately locking up people for, these short things are counterproductive. Martin?
I think you can take what John Major says now and more or less ascertain that the opposite is what Conservative voters think. He's morphing into his mate Tony Blair. They basically agree on everything now. They agree on lockdowns, they agree on net zero, they agree on going soft on crime. I remember in 1993 when Michael Howard, the formidable Home Secretary, saying prison works. If there aren't enough prisons, let's build more. It went down very well with the Conservative base. And as you get older, do you get more liberal? Well, Major was wrong on Europe. He's been wrong on everything. He's been wrong on vaccine passports. He's been wrong on lockdown.
So you'd lock up petty criminals? No,
what I'm saying is prison is a deterrent that works. Now, I do agree that in cases where we have addiction, look to more progressive aspects like Canada or Portugal, where heroin addiction, for example, is medicalised and treated because the repeat offence, the churn of people offending for robbery and then going in and out of jail like a yo-yo doesn't work. Where there's addiction, I think we could be more progressive. But sending out the general message that prison doesn't work is cotton wool liberal nonsense. And it will not play well with the Conservative base. And once again, here we are having a conversation about the Tory party completely losing its way.
Do you agree, Aaron?
I think it's completely out of tune with Conservative voters, for sure. What I would say is there's two sort of things in my mind here. Firstly, I don't think we're anywhere near punitive enough on really violent crime. And you see, obviously, this stuff gets really picked up by the media. Extraordinary story recently, I saw that an MP's daughter was hit in a hit and run by a driver, and they let this woman die by the roadside. she went to prison for a year. She was banned from driving for 18 months. And you think, how on earth is that sensible? So, on the one hand, I would like to see far more punitive treatment of people like that. But then I do think we do have a lot of people in prison, not a lot, but fewer than 50% of people in prison are there for violent crimes. Fewer than 50%. So more than 50% aren't there for violent crimes. And I think there's probably something to say that, you know, you could probably bring that down. So I think there's a mix here that I think where somebody's done something absolutely abhorrent, sexual assault, murder, you know, more grievous forms of GGBH, I think they should go down for a long time. But when somebody's got good character, no previous, and like you say, you know, somebody, you know, we're going to disagree about this. Just Stop Oil protesters with the banner drop. You know, they didn't stop traffic. The police decided to stop traffic. No previous convictions, good character. One of them's gone inside for 3 years. The other one's gone inside for 2 years, 7 months. That's going to cost the taxpayer a hell of a lot. The criminal justice system has to pay a hell of a lot. They don't pay taxes as productive citizens for a long time. Now, look, if you do it 2 or 3 times...
Yeah, but it might deter other people from behaving like idiots.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, they're still going on, aren't they? Still, but my point is this. If it's your first offence and you've got good character, I think that's a complete waste of taxpayers' money.
Do you? But is there any part of you, to the point that I was just making rather glibly, I admit there, but... if you want to send out a message, so if you've got all of this kind of stuff going on, you know, let's just use your example, Just Stop Oil.
Yeah.
And actually, if you go straight in quite hard, right, I'm gonna push as far as I can when it comes to sentencing, because not just for your punishment, but because I want to use you to send a message out to deter this going forward. That's sensible, if you ask me.
So there's a few points I'd like to respond with. Firstly, I mean, we all saw this incredible story, disgusting story, of a young man in Scotland who sexually assaulted a 13-year-old when he was 17, and I think he was sentenced in his early 20s. He didn't even get a custodial sentence. I find it extraordinary that can happen, and yet somebody who's done a banner drop and themselves haven't stopped the traffic, the police have, then go to prison for 3 years. I think something extraordinarily strange is happening to our criminal justice system.
What's happening is that in Scotland, we have this sort of situation where...
Scotland's worse, but it's bad in other places too.
But they're even softer, because they're saying, for example, this guy's brain wasn't fully formed, he's had a traumatic childhood. Crimea River, you know, someone's been raped and they will serve a life sentence. I agree with you on that. Back to Just Stop Oil, to call them taxpayers makes me scoff. How many of them pay tax? They're the most work-shy people out there. They're the work-shy against the working classes.
What's your proof for that? So hold on. So the 2 people...
they're protesting in the middle of the day, for starters.
Hold on. The 2 people...
They might work nights.
They might do.
The 2 people that went down, you don't think they had jobs?
What I'm saying is this.
And if they do have jobs, does that mean your point's irrelevant, you take it back?
No. I'm saying the majority look like the work-shy students or retirees who are quite comfortable. It's a luxury belief system. As for the damage to the economy, what about the damage to the economy by stopping the M25, stopping thousands of people getting to work because of their entitled belief system? And I do think that we can change the law, and we should be nimble, and we should be more punitive to stop these things in the bud. And the police were taking them cups of tea. It was tea and sympathy.
Well, no, hold on, Martin, you're going all over the place here, because I'm not suggesting we give them cups of tea.
They had to change and be nimble and go more hardline, because the country was appalled. The police had to act because the public made them act.
I don't think that's true. I think what happened was the police shut down traffic in a very, very high-density part in terms of traffic management of the country, and ultimately these 2 guys took the... You know, they took the punishment for it, and I think actually...
Well, hang on, why did they shut the traffic?
The police did, because of health and safety.
Yeah, they didn't, the police didn't wake up today.
Knew.
The police didn't wake up today and go, you know what, I'm really bored, so I'm just going to close this major route. What they did is these pillocks put themselves in places that they had no business being in, because it was a risk to passing, minding their own business motorists, so the police had to act.
I find it extraordinary that 2 people do a stunt. You might think it's stupid, distasteful, whatever. 2 people do a stunt. The police then stop thousands of motorists, and then these guys get 3 years. I find it very strange. And then at the same time, we have hit and runs, and the person's out of prison in a year. I think, look, we agree that the criminal justice system in this country is a joke. It's dysfunctional. What I would say is there's probably something to this, that there are people in prison who simply shouldn't be there. It's more expensive to send somebody to jail than to Yale, as a senator once said.
I'm just reading, I'll just read some of these details out in case you're not familiar with some of the things that Major was saying. He's saying many prisoners, but he's saying a sentence to short-term imprisonment, while other sentences would be preferred. So he's saying, for example, to your point, care and medical attention rather than prisons. And then he's saying, moreover, should low-level drug offenders, i.e. street dealers, who are highly likely to be of limited intelligence, as well as being addicts themselves, be sentenced to prison or given an appropriate community sentence? Well, I would push back on that, actually, and say, with all the, due respect, you can be of the most limited intelligence in the land, like literally the most, lacking of intellect, and right from wrong. It doesn't wash with me. This fella there peddling drugs to kids and all the rest of it. Oh, yeah, he didn't attend school. Oh, well, that's all right then.
And the greater point is that the Mr. Bigs, those higher up, they will adapt and manipulate and exploit softness in the law like that by exploiting children, exploiting the mentally vulnerable, exploiting those in poverty. Now, they will manipulate around those new laws and take advantage and criminalise more. So you create another problem. We don't lock up the guys who are in charge. We're going for the kids on the street who have been used and abused by those above them.
And I'd love to know, because I don't actually know the data, I must confess. He says that dealers are highly likely to be addicts themselves. Well, that surprises me, because I did used to spend my teenage years with people that I perhaps shouldn't have been spending my teenage years with. If my mum's watching, I do accept that point now. Anyway, many of the people that are dealing drugs, they're too smart to use those drugs themselves. They see those drugs as a commodity to exploit the vulnerable and make money for themselves. They're smart and they don't get on the gear because they see what it does to people. So I'd be fascinated. I don't know is the answer, but I would be fascinated to see how many people that deal drugs are actually addicted to said drugs themselves. Do you know the answer to that? I don't know. Maybe you work in that sector. If you do, you can tell me. Right, going to take a quick break. When I come back, I've got an interesting topic for you guys. The first UK baby that has been created with DNA from 3 people has been born. Apparently, this is all about limiting potential health problems in the child. But I wonder, do you think this is basically science playing God? Do you support these developments or not? See you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock. Martin Daubney is a journalist and former Brexit Party MEP, and Aaron Bastani is the founder of Novara Media. Mick says, we've just been talking about criminals then and whether or not we should be locking up more of them, particularly of the petty crime variety. Mick says, if we took all non-violent criminals and fit them with trackers, including street sleepers and able-bodied people, etc., and put them to work on farms, he says. He says that would be a better solution than prisons. How would you make them work, though? If they turn up at this farm and say, I'm not going to do that job, what would you do? Alan says, to be honest with you, Michelle, I used to be a bit of a dodgy character. His words, not mine. He says, but now I am a reformed man. He says, the thing that helped me stop getting arrested over again was giving up alcohol. Too many people get arrested just because they are drunk idiots, says Alan. Well, firstly, congratulations to you for reforming your behaviour, because I think that takes real guts and strength of character. You've got to change your peer group as well, so respect to you for that. You won't like my next part of my sentence, though, because I think if people are out and about getting drunk and, to quote you, being drunk idiots, I think they should be put into, like, a drunk tank to wake up, and when they do wake up and sober up, they should be charged for their night in custody. That's what I think. You might disagree, though, Alan. I'm sure you'll tell me if you do. Right, let's move on. Get this. Britain now, we've had the first baby that has been born to 3 parents. Yes, you did hear that correctly. I can indeed count. And this is all about, it's been called one of the biggest leaps forward in IVF, really. And it's all about trying to prevent children from being born with various different illnesses, which could actually go on and develop, I don't know, learning difficulties, disabilities, or early death, or whatever. This has been hailed by some people. I'll start with you, actually, Aaron. This has been hailed by some people as a fantastic scientific breakthrough. It's been criticised by others as, you know, humans basically trying to play God and almost kind of editing children, and the next step will be, you know, I want a brown-eyed kid and not a blonde-haired one, or whatever. What do you make to it all?
You know, I think you've captured it there. This particular innovation, I mean, it's important to say with regards to IVF, you know, I think playing God, that ship has sailed just with IVF, and this is a kind of upgrade on that. So when you have IVF or when you have procreation, you obviously have a genetic blueprint of the mother and the father, and then you have the child. In terms of the chromosomes of the child, it's a 50-50 mix of both. As you've said, with the mother here, the mitochondria of the woman's genetic sort of blueprint can be upgraded, it can be edited almost, a bit like cut, copy and paste with the computer, with another woman's genetic data. Now, if you had a genetically inherited condition in your family, say Parkinson's or early onset Alzheimer's, and somebody says, look, we can do this slight procedure and we'll get rid of it, I think almost everybody watching would say, great. And that's what this kind of treatment touches on. But as you've said, there's a huge spectrum of possibility here, isn't there? Because you can get designer babies. You know, people have plastic surgery already, you know, change your nose, change your eyes. Fine, I haven't got a problem with it. But all of a sudden, they might say, I quite fancy changing my child's nose, my child's eyes, make them smaller or taller. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a real slippery slope here. But I think on the face of it, I think this is a positive idea and a positive breakthrough.
Martin?
One thing I like about this is a stark reminder that in the age of being a Z, a Zer, a they or a them, actually, you know, genetically, you need to be a mother and a father to procreate and have children. You know, and we need that genetic code. But I do concur that this is brilliant. You know, genetic technology allows 10% of a genome to be inserted, the defective bot replaced with an external mother, no genetic characteristics of that mother, so it will look like the original mother, but it tweaks that imperfection away. But yeah, you're right. I mean, where does it end? You know, do you want to have kids that aren't fat? And I've got friends who've been out of the country to have IVF in places like Cyprus, where you can choose the gender of your child. That's illegal in Britain for good reason. The same as it was in like China, where people were terminating, you know, the wrong gender. It was very encouraged to have boys, you know, for the sort of the prestige. And then we saw a trend now in Western people choosing to have girls. They think girls have a better chance in life. Society is set up to be more favourable towards girls. Liberal Western women and partners are choosing, ostensibly if they can, to have girls over boys. I think that's dangerous. And I think we should be very, very careful about what we wish for, because it will ultimately go, I think, towards a sort of darker place where the wrong kinds of traits or facts are out, and we get all sorts of problems when we meddle with nature. We're not God, we're human. We should respect that genetic code.
Yeah, and I find this a really, almost a bit of a tricky one, because normally I've got real clear views, and on this one I'm a little bit in the middle, because you say, oh, you know, ship has sailed, we're already playing God with IVF, but IVF, it's basically just the practice of nature. Egg meets sperm, we fertilise it, and pregnancy.
Yeah.
It's just basically all you're doing is giving a helping hand to nature. So I don't really see standard IVF the way that I see this. One of the challenges that I've got in and around the whole kind of situation with things at the moment is, yes, you get your pregnancy and people congratulate you and all the rest of it, and until you've had a child and you have your NIPE checks and all the rest of it, you don't realise just how many things, health things, can be challenging with that pregnancy. It's not plain sailing in any way, but in this country, you've got disability selective termination. So we have this list of conditions where a person can terminate their pregnancy pretty much up until day one in this country. And some of those reasons, when you read that list, they make me deeply uncomfortable because, of course, it's things like Down syndrome. And you might remember a lady with Down syndrome. She went to the courts, I think it was at the back end of last year, and she argued, there's this campaign group called Don't Screen Us Out. And she was arguing her right to live a life is more, you know, whatever the words, should take precedent to the mother's right to terminate that pregnancy. And she lost a case, but she's taking it to the next level. And I just find it really interesting, because everybody's wish when you get pregnant is to have a healthy pregnancy. But sometimes that just doesn't work out. And I don't know what I'm trying to say, because there's a lot of people in society that have physical ailments, that have mental ailments, and I don't see those people as less than. I don't see somebody, I don't know, that was born with a club foot or a cleft palate and some of these conditions that you can terminate your child, I don't see them as less than.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know, having been through, you know, fatherhood, birth twice, not myself, obviously, but witnessing...
Well, in this day and age, Martin, never say never.
But witnessing, you know, those big needles going in, screening for Down syndrome, it's incredibly traumatic, you know, to watch your partner go through that. And it asks really big questions of yourself. It's like, OK, so if we find out the wrong answer, do we terminate this life? It's very, very gruelling. And the answer sometimes is that nature can be very cruel. And maybe it's not an entitlement that everybody can have a child or a healthy child. And, you know, that sounds like a horrible, horrible thing to say. But when we start meddling, what unintended consequences are we going to get down the line?
But then the flip side of this, if anyone watching this has ever been through a situation where your child has a condition or is in pain or struggles, as a parent, you know, you will connect with what I'm saying, I'm sure. You would do anything to take that pain, that discomfort, that condition away from your child. You would do anything. You would say, give it to me, I will take that condition.
Sacrifice your own life.
Give that child a healthy life, I will take the ailment, whatever it is. And unfortunately, you can't do that. So it's just such a complex situation. And I'm fascinated to hear your views at home. What do you make to it all? Do you celebrate this advancement? Do you think it's good? It's science, it's a development. Are you of the camp, for example, that worries, where will this end? Do you get concerned about people, perhaps, I don't know, choosing their gender? Martin says it's illegal in this country, but should it be? Should you be allowed, if you've got a family of 5 boys or whatever and you want a girl, should you be allowed to make that choice? I don't know, you tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you can reach me. Next up, I am going to settle something once and for all. My question is a very simple one. These so-called work issues and culture wars, etc., do they matter, and do you care about them? Sir Keir Starmer reckons apparently they don't matter. Rishi Sunak says yes, they do. You tell me. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Martin Dewbberry, the journalist and former Brexit Party MEP, keeps me company, as does Aaron Bastani, the founder of Novara Media. We've just been having what I thought was a fascinating conversation about a really fascinating situation about a baby being born with three, DNA from three parents, all in order to try and avoid ailments, etc. going forward. Christine, you've just been in touch saying your son Billy died at the age of 14 from muscular dystrophy, and you say you would give anything to have him with you today, and you would have had this procedure in an absolute heartbeat. Well, I've got to be honest, we can all sit and pontificate, can't we, and the theory of this and the theory of that, but actually, until anybody has been through these situations, until anybody gets faced with these kind of decisions, nobody really knows how they would react. So I'm really sorry to hear your news, Christine, and maybe all of these things, they are good if they can help children live longer and healthier. Right, if I may, let's move on. Let's talk about an issue that divides people, shall we? I mean, we seem to go round and round on this, and we never really square it away, so let's see if we can put it to bed once and for all. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have been clashing again. The subject in hand this time is the so-called culture wars. There's so many different variations and permeations of this. Do you think, when we say culture wars, we all kind of really know what we're talking about now, work issues, trans issues, women's spaces, all these kind of things. Do you think they matter or not?
Well, I think they matter to the people that care about them. I suppose the disagreement between Sunak and Starmer is how many people care about them. There was polling out by Ipsos ahead of the local elections. Ipsos, a very credible pollster. And of the four big issues for the electorate, I would say three were non-culture war issues. So it was inflation, NHS, energy prices, and then fourth was migration, immigration, which I think is a very cultural issue in this country, left-right issue. So three of those four issues are very economic, very material, and I think seeing that makes me kind of, and look, I'm no Keir Starmer fan, but I think there's probably some wisdom that right now, in 2023, given what's happened with inflation, given what's happening with energy prices, food inflation is 20%, I wonder how many people care about this stuff. I'm sure a big part of the Conservative Party base does, and if you want to win a general election as a Conservative, you probably have to say something quite significant about these issues. But for the swing voters, hard to say. And also for those voters...
Do you care about them, these issues?
You'd have to go on an issue-by-issue basis.
Well, for example, all this conversation about trans rights and women's spaces, etc. Does that matter to you?
Well, I care about people's civil liberties. And there's clearly there's competing demands there in terms of civil liberties. I mean, in so much as it affects my life, obviously I'm going to care more about inflation, costs of rent, NHS, because it doesn't affect me. And I suppose that's really what I'm saying here, is that for most people out there, those issues don't impact them. They have an opinion on them, and they might feel very strongly about them. But like I say, in 2023, when you've got high inflation, high energy prices, they might be thinking, oh, God, I might be in negative equity in my house in 6 months, or I've got to renew my mortgage in a few months, and it's going to be, you know, double what it presently is. I think those are bigger issues for most people.
Do you care?
I do care, and a huge amount of the electorate care. And for Starmer to brush it off as an irrelevance, as if talking about not clamping down on grooming gangs because the majority happen to be British Pakistani men, comparing that to kind of ploughman's lunch, should be plough person's lunch, it is the way that this all being lumped together. But actually, at the heart of it is a hierarchy. A hierarchy that's been invented by the Liberal left, which says this issue is more important than that issue. So turning a blind eye to things like grooming, in case it offends people, is a bit racist, not taking a proper position on immigration because, we look a bit racist too. And that's the problem. This woke virus, I think, has infected now. It's infected education. So we have children, my children, coming home from school telling me they feel ashamed to be white because they're told that whiteness is bad and they're part of an oppressive, systemic problem. It depresses children. Woke is something... in a different way, defines our energy policy because we are now wedded to the idea of net zero as a religion. We can't burn fossil fuels. So, OK, it's not woke in one sense, but a politically accepted monoculture of thought along energy, along education, along race, is an impervious, insidious factor. And to brush it off as irrelevant, I think, just goes to show how out of touch Keir Starmer is, especially with the working classes.
And I think, actually, people can care about different things. So you've got your short-termism, can I pay my bills and whatever? And, of course, that is a concern. Is my job safe, secure, whatever? Of course, don't doubt people think about that. But then there is also a situation whereby, actually, some of these issues will have ramifications for years, if not decades, to come if they're not squared away properly within proper debate, respectful debate in the here and now. So as a new mum, or relatively new mum, I care very much about what children will be taught in schools. I care very much. I don't want my child going to school and having seeds planted into his brain that actually, you know, you're a boy, but if you want, you can be a girl. I don't want that. That makes me uncomfortable. So actually, those kind of matters for me are very important. I don't like this shift. What I think is actually the erasing of women. I don't like this notion that suddenly I've got to be labelled a cis woman. Suddenly I can't say, you know, I've got a woman's period product. I've got to say I've got a menstruating person's products. I care about those kind of things. Of course, I care about the health, well-being, etc. of all my family, etc. As a priority order. But those things matter to me as well.
No, I think that's fair, but I would just want to emphasise that when people are polled on this, that their biggest issues, and like I say, people have many issues, but the biggest issues for people, and like I say, in 2023, because we've had a really exceptional 18 months...
I'd love to know what question, because what we hear about is when polled, or do you know what question they were asked?
No, I wanted to set something else, but it's fine, go on.
Yeah, because what I always found interesting is people say, right, X amount of people think this. I always make this point. I have never, ever been polled for anything in all of my life. I don't know anyone that is, and I am fascinated about who are you asking, how have you selected them, and what exactly is it you're asking?
I'll just add quickly, though, I think there's something important here, which is...
very quickly, look at the time, it's flown. Go.
You said about, you know, your kids coming back and being told that it's awful to be white or something. This is plainly ridiculous. Or grooming gangs, that's a crime issue. And I think the worry with the woke stuff is, as you call it, is that we're putting far too many issues under one umbrella. And actually, I think most people in this country, left or right, would agree that teaching white kids that being white is bad shouldn't happen. I think most people would say that. That
is a debate for another day. Time flies when you're having fun. Mike says these two guests not only bring up good points on subjects, but they bring out the best of our Michelle on Dewbs Co. And I love the programme. Well, we love you, Mike, and everyone else that's watched, listened and contributed to the conversation tonight. Thank you. Aaron, Martin, thank you for your company tonight. You guys take care. Have a fantastic evening. Do not go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next, and I will see you tomorrow.
Good evening and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie Shuttleworth, from the Met Office. Now, Thursday we'll see another day of heavy showers and a risk of thunderstorms. Low pressure is very much still in charge of the UK's weather, and that's pushing these frontal systems, bringing more areas of rain to more northern and eastern areas of the country through Wednesday evening and into tomorrow as well. So we'll continue to see that rain across Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland from that front. But showers from the day will start to fade away, though they could linger a little while for the likes of East Anglia and other southeastern areas. But for many, it'll be a dry night and a dry start to Thursday, with some low cloud lingering across the high grounds of parts of the Midlands. Through the rest of Thursday, we'll see some sunshine lasting through central and southern areas of England and across northwestern and southern parts of